today's first panel called The M Word, Why Men Are Overrepresented Amongst Perpetrators of Online Abuse and the Role of Free Speech. We are also going to invite Christian Mogensen back to the stage as a participant of this panel. We are going to ask Andreas Carlin to come and join us. He holds a degree in social work and a degree in psychology with a focus on domestic violence. He is here on behalf of MEN, the Organization for Gender Equality in Sweden. And he has also educated schools, youth centers, social services, workplaces, and others in a universal and indicated violence prevention programs. And Andreas is not least part of the support platform killar.se, which offers anonymous support through low-threshold chat services and counseling centers, where conversations often focus on taking responsibility, consent, porn, and respectful relationships. So welcome, Andreas. Anni, you may take your seat. Thank you so much for your presentation. I would like to welcome Johanna Vehkoo to the stage. And Johanna is here today as a decorated award-winning journalist and nonfiction author who specializes in all kinds of misinformation and fakery on the internet. Johanna has written 5 books, one of them a journalistic graphic novel by online misogyny. She has spoken and written extensively about digital violence in Finland, is the recipient of 3 different Freedom of Speech awards, and has written about the absurd and Kafkaesque story of being indicted for defaming a well-known far-right provocateur. So we do have a very interesting collection of people here on the stage to discuss why men are overrepresented among perpetrators of online abuse and the role of free speech in that. Now, Christian, you kicked us off today with like a fiery speech about toxic masculinity. So I think I'd like to invite you to go first, and you may use that microphone. No, you have a mic on you, of course. I'm sorry, we're all mic'd up. So let's forget about the microphone unless someone in the room would like to pose a question, then we will pass that mic, of course. But I would like to invite you to be the first to sink your teeth into the question, why do you think that men are overrepresented among perpetrators, particularly of online abuse?
Well, I did touch on it at length before, but I think it has to do with the fact that you and I have also talked a lot about very few perpetrators think of themselves as doing wrong. It's done in the name of greater good. I'm doing it to protect the other men or society from the evil plights of this bad woman. Very few of the perpetrators that I've talked to, and some of them have been vehemently perpetrating for a very long time, have said, well, I'm not doing it to women, I'm doing it to this woman. And the other woman, and that other woman as well. But they were also bad. And there's sort of an interesting juxtaposition in doing evil in the name of a self-proclaimed greater good that I still have not fully cracked, but I can see that it's popping up everywhere. Furthermore, there's also, when we see the groups of men doing it together and targeted, there's an identity in doing it. It's a way of proving that you are a good man and you're allowed to be part of the treehouse. You're allowed to be part of the manly men club. That I have done good. I have told this woman to stay in the kitchen or be put in her place. Look at how good I am. It's kind of the same as wearing your local team's soccer jersey and be like, see, I'm a proud patriot boy as well. Like, please allow me a place to belong.
Mm-hmm. Also, one would think that entitlement played a part in that.
Oh, definitely. Sorry, that goes without saying, at least in this room, but yes. The entitlement, because we used to have all of this shit, and now we need to prove that we belong, that we have an identity, that we have a role in society. Mm-hmm. But we used to, and all of the stories that we read say that we inherently have the right to, well, women and society as well.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Andreas, I would love for your input on a theory that we at the Nordic Digital Rights and Equality Foundation kind of concocted when we looked at the data we collected and saw that many of the online abuse harms that we studied, particularly the sharing of nude photos without consent, but also dick pics and gendered threats. If we really studied the motivation, the driving forces behind these online harms, they could often be traced back to a lack of skills on behalf of men and boys. Often these lack of skills would present as the lack of being able to process hurt emotions. So we saw, for example, in the Icelandic data from courts that when men were taken to court for having, for example, humiliated or defamed their ex-spouse by sharing nude photos or sexual material, they would say, well, she made me so angry. I was just so rejected, etc. And when we see perpetrators of dick pics and sexual harassment taken to court, they will say, well, I was just flirting. You know, I just wanted to establish a connection or relationship with this person. So what I'm trying to get at is we've sort of concocted a theory where could it be that so many of these online harms perpetrated by men and boys can actually be traced back to a lack of skills in either A, communicating, or B, processing emotions? And if yes, is that something we can just teach them?
It's a very good question. I would say yes, and a little bit of both, obviously. We had about 6,000 conversations a year for 15 years now, which is anonymous. So we think that they are very, they say what they are thinking to us because there's no, we don't see them or they can't, be charged for what they're saying or so. And that is a conclusion we have as well, that the ability to mentalize, or the theory of mind to put yourself in someone else's shoes. The boys and young men we talk to, they lack this this ability. It's not that they can't do it, because they do it all the time when they are in the boys club. They need to understand where on the scale am I, what do I need to do. So they are reading and understanding this, but they are not doing it in these situations, as you say. So what we do is that we want to ask the right questions in the chat support and in counseling centers, and then they start thinking of this. But they will not go there by themselves. So they come to the chat support and they are angry with this. This is what happened, and this is how it become for me. And we ask, but how about the other person? What do you think about that? What do you think she or he or them are thinking about it right now? And so, I haven't thought about it. So we need to put that thoughts into their brains in order to do the thinking. But it's very clear that they do have the ability when they need to, but they don't just use it in this type of situations. So that's what I said, a little bit of both. Yes, it can be trained, and yes, we need to train them to do it in all of the situations, especially online. Because I think one of these things is that even if you're anonymous or not online, I think just the screen or not having a person next to you makes you a little bit of numb for reactions and how will this affect someone else. But the violence that we see online is the same outside online as well, in the schoolyards and stuff like that. So it's not just that, but I think that is a part of it. So we need to train this, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And that gives me personally hope, because if it is something you can learn, then it's also something we can teach.
Yes.
But some would say there's also a simplistic way of seeing it, because if it's not just a lack of skills, if it's a bigger cultural system that it belongs to, such as Christian has touched upon, then we must do more than just teach individuals. We must also be dismantling that system actively. And I will get back to that with you, how we dismantle that system actively. But before I do, I would like to welcome Johanna to partake in the conversation, not only as a woman, but also as a journalist. With free speech being very integral to what you do. Without free speech, there would be no journalism, essentially. But free speech is also, as we have learned, a very gendered thing. And it's a gendered thing not just in society as a whole, but also within journalism, where female journalists get different treatment than their male counterparts. So how would you say that the concept of free speech presents to you in a gendered dynamic?
Well, if I start by talking about online harassment of female journalists, we have quite a lot of data on that. And for instance, in the Finnish Public Broadcasting Corporation, Yle, there have been a number of studies done over the years, and 1 in 5 of all Yle journalists experience online harassment due to their journalistic work on a regular basis. So not just, they have experienced this, but on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. But what we find in these studies is that actually female and male journalists say that they experience an equal amount of harassment online. But then actually the difference comes when you look at what kind of harassment it actually is. And for women, it's very much, men get criticized for their work and for the actual substance of their stories. They do not get sent dick pics, and they don't get, called bitches or whores or things like that. But this is what women get. It's almost never about the actual story and its contents and how well it was made journalistically, what kind of journalistic decisions you might have taken whilst working on the story. It is always about the woman herself and what she looks like, her perhaps sexual morals, mm-hmm. Or about her personality. And this just does not happen to men. And then what we also know globally about women journalists and harassment that they face, according to a study made maybe perhaps 3 years ago or so by UNESCO and the International Center for Journalists, 73% of female-identified journalists all over the world experience online harassment due to their work. That's 3 in 4 journalists. It's a massive amount. And this study had respondents from 125 countries. So this is a massive global issue. And 30% of these respondents had noticed that they are actually censoring themselves when they're talking online, when they're on social media. And 20% of these female journalists had abandoned social media channels altogether. So we're actually losing voices from public debate. Mm-hmm. We're losing voices from democracy. We also have studies in Finland where local politicians were asked if they were going to, consider running for elections, and a lot of them, female ones, were responding that, no, I don't think I'm going to do that again because of this online harassment. So we're actually really losing, democratic potential of mm-hmm. many female-identified people. Mm-hmm. So this is a massive issue, obviously, for mm-hmm. Freedom of speech.
Absolutely, and democracy as a whole.
Yes.
Christian, you have studied the more hateful corners of the internet where men are actively hating and spewing misogyny. Do you think that it is a calculated strategy that what Johanna is describing, this self-censorship among women, do you think it is part of the mission as a whole, or do you think it is just a collateral damage?
For some, it definitely is. We do have data that suggests that this woman in Danish politics or this Danish female identifying parliamentarian is getting a bit too big for her own good. We need to put her in her place. We should do it by XYZ. That is the very classical 4chan or 8kun, the dark gray corners of the internet way of doing it. Mainly what we've seen is that someone on a male-dominated message board is just I really dislike this politician. And everybody else is because of the social adherence in having the same opinions, oh yeah, I don't like her either. Oh yeah, she's a bitch. I don't like her. I'm going to send her this and this and this and this. So it's the dogpile effect of needing to belong. Because Andreas touched on, this fear of not belonging, this Also, you described very well a culture where women just have not historically have had agency, like the stories we grew up on. Women are a prize you win if you kill the dragon or slay the evil king of the neighboring kingdom. Like, we're not used to imagining women as people. They are obstacles, and they very easily become that in these message boards. So it's not concretely coordinated to a large extent. It can be. More often than not, it's women become a goal, or harassing the woman becomes a tool for a social adherence to belong for the man. So she's reduced to not only an object, but like a tool I can use to become part of the guy group. So a bit of yes and a bit of even worse yes.
All right. So no lesser of two evils
No,
here.
no,
Just two evils. All right. Well, Andreas, I know that in your organization, you're used to having hard conversations with young men about masculinity, about the challenging aspects of living in an ever-changing world where norms are being pushed and challenged. So if I were to paint a picture of a young man struggling with what we have talked about, who is perhaps has an online persona that is misogynistic or spewing hatred, and with this, as Johanna has described, very real effect on our fundamental values in society, such as democracy and transparency and openness. How would you approach that conversation with a young man who would be at risk of maintaining this problem?
Well, as I would say, it would depend, given the context, of course. But what I told you about, like, train the mentalization part, that is like the goal of it. And then how you reach it could depend on hobbies or where you're at or so. Like Christian told us about the gaming, the way in through gaming. So we've done the same as well, that when we trained youth to go out to Sverok associations and talk about gaming. But we really talked about power, gender, violence and such. But all was connected to gaming. So that's like one way to put it. But when we talk with an individual in the counseling center or in the chat, then we focus very much on responsibility and the choices of it. So because many tell us, like you said, she made me so angry, or this and this happened, X and Y happened, so that's why I did it. And what we want to do in that conversation is to look at these specific events and break it down to like 20, 25, 30 different steps where you can very easily see that you made all these choices. Someone said no or didn't invite or whatever it's so, but you stepped over that boundary and you did it anyway, and you had some thoughts doing it, you had an idea with it. So what was it that you wanted to achieve doing this? So we want to flip from X happened, so I'm just a victim of this, that's why this happened. We want to flip that and ask the question, what was your target? What would you want to achieve? And mostly of the time you can see that I wanted her to shut up. So that's why. Okay, so that was the target. So you used violence to silence someone. And the answer to that is because it works. As you told us with all the statistics, and it works, and it also works in the social hierarchy in the boys club. So you need to get your eyes on these things, and when you break it down, you can see all the choices. And the good part of this is that when you have when the story is that X happened, so this happened to me, then you have no agenda or no agency. You can't affect it. So, okay, so this happened, next time it will happen the same because I can't make another choice. So you're just a victim of it. But when we take that away and look on the choices, then you flip also the agency. You can make better and other choices next time. But you have to see. Because many guys tells us that it's all blackened out. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just, stories like that. But when you dismantle every. When you look at all the instances, they can see they can tell you what they thought, what they did, and what they wanted to do. So that's a very effective way of doing it. But it takes a while. So a 15-minute chat is something sometimes hard, but it can be done quite quickly as well, if you just ask the right questions, if you know what I mean.
Right. Well, that gives reason for hope. So
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Johanna, we have talked about, and it was mentioned in the very presentation of you on stage, that you have touched upon defamation quite personally in your career.
Yes.
You've been taken to court and what you described as a Kafkaesque episode of that. We also know that defamation is quite a gendered thing, as you underlined to me in the prep talk for this very panel. Could you share with the audience how it presents as a gendered thing, defamation?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I can't really go fully into the detail of that court case because I had to write an actual full book about it because it was, there was so much nuance that didn't actually come out in the sort of news pieces published about this. But suffice to say that I called a well-known extreme right-wing extremist and online troll who actually makes a living being an online troll but also a local politician. I called him a racist and a Nazi. And to my best of my knowledge, I was only speaking the truth. But as it happens, according to Finnish defamation law, you can still be guilty of defamation even if you speak the truth, because the truth does not matter. Which, to me, as a journalist who's actually specialized in fact-checking, was really quite a difficult
Devastating.
thing to swallow. Yes. So in the two lower courts, I lost the case. Then I had to take it to the Supreme Court where I won. And this has been called the most important freedom of speech, freedom of expression decision by Finnish courts in some decades. So it's all about political free expression. And the decision says that, when you're an actual politician who is an actual far-right provocateur who makes a living of calling people all kinds of things online, then you really have to take it in the neck.
Didn't this particular politician call immigrants cockroaches and something of the like?
Oh, well, and all manner of things, yes.
Exactly.
Like I say, he makes a living out of defaming lots of people, and he collects court cases, and he's being defended in a lot of court cases, but also a plaintiff in many.
And
So-
yet he took you to court for calling him a racist.
Yes,
Yes.
but it was the public prosecutor who did that. So the public prosecutor kind of went in with his game, which was unbelievable, and did not see the fact that he was only taking me to court because I am a journalist and he doesn't like my work. So this aspect was completely ignored. But anyhow, in the end I did win, and I wrote a book about it. So,
Well done.
but in the process of that, I did learn a lot about defamation crimes in Finland, and one fact that we have to mention that should it even be a crime? I'm not too sure about that, but Helsingin Sanomat, the biggest newspaper in Finland, they they did a piece of investigative journalism, and they found out how defamation is being investigated by the police in Finland, and also how much is being indicted in the courts. And they found that it's the plaintiffs in these cases, the injured parties, the cases that actually proceed to court, they are overwhelmingly male. So men's honor is protected much more than women's honor.
Almost like the system was built by them for them.
Yeah,
One would think.
There's a point to consider.
Right.
So we do know that, and we do know also from academic research that the indictment regarding defamation in Finland it's actually arbitrary. It's completely dependent on the individual prosecutor, what gets indicted and what doesn't.
I understand. And Christian, you wanted to comment?
Yeah, I was just about to say it's amazing to hear. It's terrible to hear, but glad the outcome was at least somewhat positive. the point about defamation cases is something that often comes up in some of my corners of the internet, because exactly like you say, the legality of them can be very finicky. And I've read more arguments than I'd care for about when you have defamed a woman. Like most of the places I've read, both the Nordic forums and also the Americans where I live right now, it can never be defamation if you call a woman a bitch, because you cannot prove or disprove if a woman is a bitch. But if someone is a Nazi, well, that's adherence to a political party, and that we can prove. And I've seen some of these strategies, to your question before, I've seen those strategies discussed at length, both with defamation, also with rape, especially in the pickup artist communities. Like, when is it rape? Well, it's not rape if you can get her to instigate any sort of connection. And I can only imagine that it's the same on the other side, that there are, I don't know if we call them handbooks, but at least best practices and cases on, well, if she calls you this and this and this and this, well, then you can take action. So you just need to push her to call you a Nazi instead of an asshole.
Yes.
And then we can come down with the full force of punitive judgment.
And right now, defamation is also used as a weapon against women who speak up about domestic violence. So in Finland, there are a number of cases recently have been in the news where a man has been sentenced because of domestic abuse, and there have been restraining orders and everything. But when the woman writes about this, established truth of the abusive relationship online on social media, then the man can take her to court for defamation.
Why?
Because it doesn't matter if it's true; it can still be defaming.
We have seen a similar landscape in Sweden with connection to the Me Too movement, for example, where I think all of these factors intersect. We have toxic masculinity being uncovered, we have women being taken to court for defamation, and we have, hate speech being wielded against those that stood in the forefront of that movement. So I think everything we've discussed today kind of culminates there. And it was a very revealing moment, I think, for the global community as such. Andreas, would you like to comment on how defamation and Me Too kind of intersected in Sweden? Because it was quite unique globally here.
Yeah. I mean, it's like you told us in Finland as well. It doesn't have to be true, or it can be true. It doesn't matter, because it can still hurt someone's reputation or whatever when these accusations go to court or in public and such. So it's been quite some times repeatedly with people in this matter. So it's really a harsh environment when you speak up and then you lose on it. So it comes with a very high cost. And I understand that it silences people from the start, because eventually it's not worth it, because you will break.
Yeah, it brings to mind, because some of the front runners of the Me Too movement in Sweden were taken to court as a result of talking about things that had basis in a court of law, that had either been where men had been found guilty or at least prosecuted for crimes. And it brought to my memory a quote by a woman who said, "I wonder where a woman's freedom of speech ends and a man's honor begins." Where does that leave us? And in today's world, I would just like to invite you. Do any of you have an answer to that question?
Well, like in the Finnish constitution, both freedom of speech and your right to your honor, and also your right to your privacy, these are basic rights protected by the constitution. So whenever you have court cases dealing with these issues, the judges have to weigh which is more important, which basic right is valued more highly in this particular case. And from where I'm standing, it's really quite often that the man's honor is more important than the woman's freedom of speech, unfortunately. And when I was writing my book of comics journalism about online misogyny. I did interview dozens of women for this book. And I think, one particular example just comes to mind about how the police just doesn't give a shit about, women being defamed online. One journalist told me that she had filed like numerous police complaints about being called and all manner of things online. And the police just did not even contact her about these. After these cases had expired, then she would just get a letter that, this case is not being investigated because it's not worthy of investigation. Mm-hmm. But when she reported that her bike was stolen, the police called her on the same day.
Mm-hmm. Oh, gosh. Well, I am afraid that that's going to be our final note. But I will look at what we have just discussed and the leading question, which was, why are men overrepresented among perpetrators, and what is the role of freedom of speech? And I do think that we have answered that the reason why men are overrepresented among perpetrators is because they get away with it more easily. And because of sense of entitlement and toxic masculinity feeding into that, and a justice system that kind of upholds it as well. I think that will have to be our concluding note. Thank you so much, and please give a warm applause to our panelists.
Thank you.